All right, guys, I'm here with Larry Rogers. Let's get into it. So, we were just talking about uh, bail, right? And
Yep.
and stuff. So, why don't you tell me about that process? Because I don't know anything about that.
Okay, so when a person is arrested, taken into custody, there's a rule that requires that they appear before a judicial officer within 24 hours. In Maryland, that's called a court commissioner, not a judge. Once that person has his initial appearance, they are read the charging document. They do sort of a background thing. They check their criminal record. And the state's attorney and the defense attorney make a recommendation about what the bail should be. And then, if the person is continued to be held, the following morning they will have a bail review hearing before a district court judge. I believe at Wabash for the males and Patapsco for the females, or vice versa. I can't remember, but it's definitely, it was a time when it was not considered a critical stage of the proceedings in a criminal case, but there was a big Supreme Court case where they decided that it is in fact a critical phase. So
The bail review.
yeah, the bail review and the initial appearance,
Oh, okay.
right? Because it was just like a throwaway,
Because you got a call and it's 5:45 p.m. right now.
right?
So, and so this is like you said, 24 hours, right?
It's 24 hours a day. As a matter of fact, when they started what is called the Appointed Attorneys Program, and that program came up about directly as a result of the Supreme Court case that I just referred to, and yeah, that's when it started, and I used to work there the first year. Back in those days before COVID, we had a little office in the jail, and we would work shifts 4 to 12, 12 to 8,
Mm-hmm.
8 to 4, and it was like $50 an hour.
Okay.
So my typical, because I usually worked either 4 to 12 or 12 to 8 on the weekends. So you come in at 12. They give you all the packets for all the guys that are charged. Then you go and you meet with them. So if you got 12 of them, you meet with all 12.
Right.
And then you go in the commissioner's booth and you do all the hearings. So usually finish about 5 a.m.
Holy crap.
Yeah. And then, like, because we usually would bring food. We'd have some food and stuff and coffee and whatever. And then go home at 8 o'clock. So that was a good way for attorneys to supplement their income, because the government pays. Like, you submit a fee petition for each day that and this pops up on your screen electronically about a week later. So at one point, that's how I was paying my rent in my office and my utilities and all of that, because I would get a check comes out to like $400 a day.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be, I would work maybe 2 days, like a week, one weekday from 4 to 12 after I got home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, after I got home. And then on the weekend, 12 to 8, or sometimes 2. And my wife was an attorney, so we did it together,
That's
so
not bad. Yeah.
yeah, so but she always wanted to work 12 to 8, because she liked to go to sleep.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
Right, she
I don't
liked to
blame
go to sleep, so she would take a nap
Mm-hmm.
at 6 p.m. at home, and then jump in the car and go down there at midnight, and she'd be ready to go.
Everybody else.
Not
is
me.
Like, yeah. Exactly.
Give me a cup of coffee, man.
Yeah. By the way, we just jumped right into it, but you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Larry Rogers. I was sworn into the Maryland Bar on December 19th, 1989. I started out when I was in law school back in those days. you could be a judge's clerk
All in law.
for more than one, while in law school and for more than 1 year.
Oh, wow.
As a matter of fact, in Baltimore City back in the old days, it was always done like that. You stay with the same judge. I was with the same judge for 4 years because I went to school at night.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I learned everything. That's where I learned civil procedure
Right.
because I never learned it in school. I learned it by doing motions because I would do the motions and the judge would sign them. And after you do that like 10 times,
Right.
you pretty much know venue and jurisdiction and amending complaints and all that nonsense, minutia.
Before
Oh,
law
so-
school, I mean, all lawyers were taught by just, it was just like shadowing a lawyer, right? Like
Yes.
Abraham Lincoln and everybody, they all learned it that way. So,
Yeah. Just like that commercial, Abraham Lincoln, the guy says, "Sorry, fella, you got to get that sheepskin." He's like, "But I was the president." But anyway, so I spent a judge's clerk. I also clerked for OPD before that, like my first year. And I was in the state's attorney's office. My first job out of school was an assistant state's attorney in juvenile for 6 months. And I say 6 hot months because it really wasn't my cup of tea. And I just wasn't for me.
so what about it, if you don't mind sharing?
No, I don't mind. I didn't like it because I just felt like a lot of what was being done was not fair. I felt like in the state's attorney's office at that time, it probably still is that way. You really didn't have a lot of discretion, and they really didn't trust your professional judgment. And I knew I was a new lawyer, right? But I mean, I went to school and all of that for what? To exercise my professional judgment, right?
Right.
But excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. But they didn't allow me to do that. And some things occurred, and I decided that I was going to leave. I ran into a couple of friends I knew from OPD, and literally, he saw me in the hall in the courthouse and asked me what I was doing. I said, "I'm a prosecutor." He said, "Man, get out of here. You're a what?"
Right.
He said, "Come on, go with me." So we go over to his office. He calls the deputy public defender on the phone and sends me down, and they hire me.
Like on the spot.
Literally. On the spot.
That's awesome.
I went back to the state's attorney's office, submitted my resignation letter, took my badge, put it on the table, and walked out.
So what is I'm assuming there's a cultural difference, right, between OPD and,
It's you know, the public defender's office, I loved working there
okay.
because everybody got along for the most part. Everybody believed in what they were doing there. Nobody questioned your judgment about whether or not you decided to put on a witness or not put on a witness, or which strategy you used or what defense. No supervisor would come to you and question what you were doing. They only just required that you be able to support what you're doing. They didn't, and so if I had a homicide case and I decided that, for example, that I wasn't going to call an alibi witness because you never win a case with an alibi witness, then my supervisor would just say, "Okay, Larry, just explain to me why," because the family's complaining. I said, "Well, because I've never won a case with an alibi defense. And name me one person who's won a homicide case with an alibi defense. It never works. So you're better off not putting on any defense at all, especially if the case is weak, right?" You know, I believe in less is more. Less is more.
So how do you, obviously criminal's totally out of my realm, but
Mm-hmm.
all right, you got a homicide case, you got an alibi witness that you don't want to bring to the stand. How do you approach that when you say, like, don't even defend it?
Well, first of all, you have to make an independent evaluation of the quality of the state's case, independent of the alibi. And a lot of times, if the case isn't all that great in terms of the criminal agency, meaning the identity of the person who committed the crime, then why put on an alibi defense? And let me tell you why I feel so strongly about that. I was a young lawyer, I want to say 1992.
I was born in 92.
Oh, yeah? And I was in front of Judge Previs. Some of our viewers may remember Judge Previs. He was a strange guy, but I liked him. We got along. Mm-hmm. He was a yeller, right?
Okay.
He would yell and stuff. Right. So I tried an attempted armed robbery case. So we tried a case and doing really well. So my client is like elbowing me, call my witness, call my witness. We don't need to call your witness. We're winning, right?
Right.
Stop.
Mm-hmm.
So he just kept on. And of course, instead of me sticking to my instincts, I listened to him. So I called his girlfriend. Oh, he was in the hospital. I didn't have any hospital records or any, right?
Right.
So I tried a case. Case goes to the jury. They're like 9-3 for not guilty. So when the judge declared a mistrial, I went to talk to the jurors. Say, hey, what happened? They shouldn't convict. Nobody should be. He says, you should have never put on his girlfriend. She was horrible. And I learned my lesson. And a lot of what you do in litigation, civil or criminal, you learn from the mistakes that you make. And that's a lesson that I learned, that you have to trust your instincts. You have to trust how you feel right here and right here. And never change what you intend to do with the case in the middle of the case. That's a disaster. You're going to lose if you do that, because the jury's going to pick it up that you're confused, you don't know what you're doing. But most of all, it just doesn't work that way. It's like gambling. You just push all the chips in, and this is what you're doing, and this is how we're doing it, and we're rolling with that all the way, and whatever happened, just happened. And if you lose, you file an appeal. If you win, everybody's happy,
Yeah. Would you? So in my short time as a lawyer, like, I started kind of differentiating two types of attorneys. I want to say, like, some are more gut attorneys, and other ones are a little more heady, a little technical, more on the technical side. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it's a fair assessment, but I like to think of myself as a little bit of both.
Okay.
But I probably the majority is I go by my instincts.
Okay.
Because, a lot of people, a lot of lawyers have this idealistic notion about winning cases on motions. And let me tell you something, folks. That never happens. Once in a blue moon, you win a suppression hearing. And literally, once in a blue moon, you win. I can tell you in 2015, I won a suppression hearing because the Supreme Court had just decided this case that said you need a search warrant to go through someone's phone. The case was decided the day before my suppression hearing.
Okay.
The opinion came out. So we go in, Talbot County, and the state's attorney looks at me, and I look at her, and I start waving the
Right.
opinion. She's like, we're done here. We're done. I'm no processing this case,
Right.
Right. So that happens very rarely. What young lawyers need to understand is that the facts of the case are everything. It is your ability to take those facts and manipulate them in your client's favor. That's all it is. And it's not magical or mystical or, people watch these shows on TV and they think it's some sort of mystical, magical, highfalutin thing. Mm-hmm. It's really not. If you know what your theory of the case is, because you always have to develop a theory of the case, then your opening statement, your cross-examination of the state's witnesses, and your closing argument should flow just like the river. They should meet each other and flow right on, And once you learn to think about it that way, then it becomes, I won't say easy because it's never easy. It just becomes easier.
Yeah, like simpler.
Like simpler.
Yeah.
It's like this. First year law school, you're lost. Mm-hmm. Lost. I was lost.
Yeah,
I swear, I think some nights I just wanted to cry because I went to school at night and worked all day. And I'd be so tired in school and I'd be so confused and I didn't know what was going on. And somebody took me aside. My judge took me aside and said, look, man, here's what you need to understand. The first thing is, you see this book? The cases are wrong. They give you the cases knowing that they're wrongly decided in the textbook. And what they do, you know this, they only give you parts of the opinion. Mm-hmm. So the professor will call on you and ask you about a part that's not in the book, right? So I learned to go pull the whole opinion and read the whole opinion. So when the professor would call on me, I'd say, oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, very good, Mr. Rogers. Yeah, you know that. But it's just simple. It's like the whole thing is just a mind game when you go to law school. They tell you literally when you sit down in the orientation. I went to University of Baltimore.
Yep, same.
And it used to be in those days, in 1984, there was an undergrad side and a law school side. Mm-hmm. So, the undergrad side was on, before you get on 83. What's that street?
Monument.
Huh?
Monument. Or Charles.
Charles, I think. Yeah, because you go past and go on 83. Mm-hmm. So you sit there, and I was there with friends, right? Mm-hmm. A couple guys I went to college with and stuff, and the dean said, "Look to your left and look to your right. One of y'all ain't gonna be here after year 3, or you might even quit your first year." And I was like, now I'm really scared to death, okay, because I'm not trying to flunk out. Mm-hmm. And another lesson that I learned while in law school was that when you're in your first year, you have all different types of people. You have the type who thinks they know everything. Right? You know the guy I'm talking about. Gunners. Yeah, that's a good term for it, right? And so you would have people always raising their hand. Yeah. So the lesson I learned was to keep my mouth shut and listen. Mm-hmm. I never volunteered in class. Why? I mean, especially that first year. After the first year, you get a little more comfortable, but you still understand that you have to listen. You learn more by listening than talking, and that's that's life in general. Yeah. But once you get that Socratic method down, and once you get the fact that they're just playing mind games on you, mm-hmm. then you know that you can do it. It's almost like a light bulb. Bing! Went over top of my head, right? I'm going to show you this.
I just viewed it as hazing, man.
Yeah, I guess that'd be another way to look at it. But this is my University of Baltimore Law School ID.
Look at that.
Okay? That's fall
Dude,
of...
you look like Denzel. I'm not even kidding. I'm not even messing around. Seriously. You probably got that a lot. That's awesome. I don't know why you still have this. It's wild.
Well, I have it because it's a monument. It helps me stay focused. When I look at it, I remember the pain of what I was going through at the time. So I know to show up in court on time and be prepared.
Right.
Okay? That's the key. Everything goes around that. You always make sure that you're prepared, and you always make sure that you are on time. People say, oh, you're in a public defender's office, you don't need a calendar. You do need a calendar because you need to know what you're doing a week ahead of time. You need to be able to know that, okay, I have a traffic docket at North Avenue in a week. Because you got a plan. It's like when I first started, people didn't go to the jail in the public defender's office to see their clients. I'm sorry, folks. Most of you all are retired and everything, but I'm letting it out. Most people did not go to see their clients. Well, me and a couple of my friends decided we were going to change all of that. So we would make them give us our files a week ahead of time, and we would literally go to the jail and see our clients. And what that does is it develops the attorney-client relationship. And the clients understand that you really care about them. You're not just a file to them, to the lawyer. And so when you come in that morning to do the docket, there ain't a whole lot of rap and all that. It's like, I saw you at the jail. Here's the offer. You don't want to take it? We're going to have a trial? Cool. You're not going to take it? You are going to take it? Cool. Okay? Like, here's a little story I always tell. Go to the jail, see a guy. And back in those days, it was lots of simple possession cases on district court dockets. I mean, they would be full, like 30 of them.
Okay.
People with 1 or 2 pills in their pocket, or weed or something, right? So, say, sitting on the bench waiting for the case to get called. Say, sir, so what are we doing? Are we going to try the case, or are you going to accept the state's offer, or what? Oh no, man, we need to go in the back and talk. No, we don't. We already talked about it. Here, listen, here's the deal. The search was good. The chemist report is positive for drugs. We're in front of the judge, and they're asking for probation. Do you want to go home today, or would you like to tempt fate and get 60 or 90 days in jail in the Baltimore City Detention Center? They used to call it Baltimore City Jail back then. But I guess a point I'm trying to make is that establishing that attorney-client relationship with your clients, and it doesn't matter if it's a criminal case or a civil case, or, I mean, your client could be a multi-million-dollar corporation, or your client could be some rummy on the street charged with being drunk and disorderly. You treat them both the same way. You treat them with dignity and respect. You listen to them. And you try as much as you can, when it's realistic, to accomplish the goal that they want. Okay, because, each case is different. Sometimes the goal for the person is just to avoid going to jail. Sometimes the goal is to gamble and try to win the whole case. So it really just depends on each circumstance. But that's what I would always tell new lawyers who are trying to learn what I call the nuts and bolts of the profession, which is evidence, procedure, calendar management, being on time, preparing your cases. You know, when I was in the state's attorney's office, there was they call them magistrates now, but back then they were called masters.
Okay.
So as a state's attorney, you would be assigned to a certain master or magistrate for a month. So back then it was all stolen car cases and stuff. So this particular master would take me aside after the doc and he said, look, Larry, here's what you got to understand. Always think about who has the burden on each issue. Because if you don't understand burdens, then you can't try a case. If you don't understand that the state has the burden, then you'll be doing stupid things like calling witnesses when you shouldn't, missing the argument on a motion for judgment of acquittal, knowing when something is hearsay and it's not admissible. All these things, these are basic things that you have to know if you're going to be good at this. And really what happened, literally, what I used to do, there was a book called Evidentiary Foundations by a guy named N. Winklereed, a professor at UCLA Law School. And it was a whole book. I still have the book. Pattern direct examinations. How to get photos and the evidence. Mm-hmm. I literally would photocopy the page and stick it in each file for whatever I needed to do. And after a month, I was rolling.
Right. Yeah.
Because you internalize it.
Yeah.
But it's really about repetition and being able to do those same general things with every case. Pick up the file, read it, interview your client, figure out what to do. It's kind of like a doctor, I guess. You diagnose the situation and then this needs a trial. They can't prove this element, so we should be able to win the case. Yeah. That kind of thing.
So I think a big thing for new lawyers is not wanting to look silly in court. Making mistakes, whether it's stumbling over their words or it's something like they blank, right? And when they're trying to get a photograph and evidence or something and they blank, they forget the magic words or something like that.
That never happened to me because I made a photocopy of the pattern direct examination and I literally would be looking at it while I'm asking the questions.
Right.
But that's a normal emotion to have. Mm-hmm. It's normal to be anxious and nervous. Hell, I still get anxious before I pick a jury. I'm like a cat on a hot tin roof, mm-hmm. the whole night before mm-hmm. in the court and, like, fuck, I hope I don't mess this up. And I'm still saying this to myself.
Right.
Which
is a good thing. I mean,
it's a good thing.
Care. Yeah.
It keeps you humble and honest mm-hmm. with yourself. You have to be humble and honest. And see, what you just described was something that a professor at the University of Baltimore, he's now deceased, used to say. He said, look, the most important thing that you have to do in your first year of law school is not be afraid to be wrong. Mm-hmm. He said, hell, half the cases in the book are wrong. Half the cases that the Supreme Court decided, they screwed up. So you need to understand that you're just a human being. But luck favors the well-prepared. That was a screensaver I had on my computer in the 1990s.
That's awesome.
In the public defender's office. And I had a friend who's deceased now, and I got the screensaver from him. And he was always prepared, man. He was always on time. And you could see him trying a case, and they would turn his left flank, and he wouldn't bat an eyelash. He wouldn't trip. You would never know that he just got his ass kicked, right? You would never know because he was in his office on Saturday and Sunday preparing his cases. And people tend to think, because they watch TV, they don't understand the little things that win cases. It's the little things,
Like
right?
what?
Like for I'm gonna use an example of a civil case. A guy called me about 6 or 7 years ago, and he got hit crossing Bel Air Road, and he was messed up, man. He was in hospital for months. It was a great case on damages. So when I'm interviewing him, I say, because I'm thinking, ching, we're going to get money for this, right? I said, well, did you cross at the crosswalk? I said, no, man, nobody crosses at the crosswalk. I was in the middle of the street. Bam, he got hit, crossing in the middle, in the middle of the block. Uninsured motorist fund said, no, dog, no money. No, there's no liability. The guy hit him at 55 miles an hour and kept on going.
Jeez.
And it turned out that the guy was a rich guy driving a Jaguar who was drunk. Right? Mm-hmm. That's the perfect example of what I'm talking about. One little fact. If he had crossed at the crosswalk, he'd have got millions. But he crossed in the middle of the street, so he gets nothing.
That's also because we got contrib, right?
Yeah, which is not the greatest thing in the world to have,
You think that's ever going to change in Maryland? The comparative?
You know what? I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical because the insurance lobby is not going to, they're not going to let that happen. My wife is from Canada. They have no-fault car insurance, straight up.
Wow.
So I asked my wife, I said, so what happens when me and you, for example, have a car accident?
Right.
She says, we exchange our information. My insurance pays my bills and my damages and fix my car. Your insurance company does the same thing. And if they think you're going to get some pain and suffering, they give each one some. So that's the way it should be.
How do they make money? Clearly, the insurance companies are still in business there, right? So
Yeah.
they're making money.
They're making money, but it's not this whole, to me, this whole personal injury industry is bankrupt. It's morally bankrupt. I mean, because what's going on now, to me, is $2,500 for PIP is nonsense today. Maybe that was good 25 years ago, 15 years ago, but $2,500 does not cover your client's medical bills. You know it and I know it and they know it. But they will not increase the personal injury protection. It should be at least $5,000. Because how many times I've had a personal injury case where I used a PIP to pay part of the medical bills, and there's still $2,000 left in medical bills. And I don't take high level cases. That's for Rob and Tommy and all of them. I don't mess with that. So I take the little district court fender bender, and see if I could squeeze $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 out of it. But that's more of a sideline for me in terms of my practice. It's not the main thing. My main thing is criminal defense.
So going back to that, you were at the OPD for how long?
23 years.
23 years.
23 years.
All right. So I'm assuming you have defended every kind of case in 23 years.
From disorderly conduct to serial killers.
We don't have any serial killers in Maryland.
Yeah, we do. Trust me. I represented a guy one time. This story. This guy my client was standing on the corner. He was homeless. Weird, really weird guy. And he sees this woman riding. She stops at the stoplight where he is. And he begs her for a ride. And she gives him a ride. So he sees these coins in her car. They're like these rare coins, right? Coins are worth $25,000 or something ridiculous like that. She's just riding around in her car with them.
What kind of coins are these?
Some rare coin. I don't know
How
exactly.
does he know that?
He doesn't know.
Okay.
He steals a couple and he takes them to the pawn shop and they say, man,
Oh, wow.
this is worth $5.50 and this was worth $8. So he decides, instead of just consider himself lucky as a homeless person, now he got almost $1,000. He decides that he's going to try to meet up with this woman again. So in this, and I'm trying to remember, I think it might have been like Charles Village or whatever. All the homeless people hung together, took a support system for each other. And it was always one person who had a car. It was the girl. And it was always one person who had an apartment. So they would all gather in the apartment. So he ran into her, and they start dating.
Okay.
So he finds out that the woman residence is an $800,000 horse farm in Pennsylvania, and that she chooses to be homeless, but she's got $170,000 in her checking account or something crazy like that. She's just riding around, hanging with homeless people in Baltimore.
Why?
I don't know. She was,
Okay.
she wasn't all there.
Okay.
But anyway, the bottom line is that him and his buddy, they were supposed to be taking her to a doctor's appointment. They take her to Druid Hill Park and stabbed her 47 times or something, and took her and got access to her bank account and all of that. And they found her body in Druid Hill Park. She had a dog. The dog is still tied up there barking. That's how somebody was jogging and they found the woman's body. So we go to trial. Mistrial, right? First time. Second time.
For what? What was the mistrial?
Mistrial was on the homicide.
Right, but like why?
I don't remember.
Okay.
It was a long time. I think he's convicted of robbery, and they decided to try him on the murder again. So we do the murder case. This time he gets convicted, and then it turns out that the same prosecutor had prosecuted him 10 years before, because he had murdered his girlfriend, allegedly. But he won. So after I try the case, he gets his life plus 1,000 years, whatever it was, I don't remember. So I'm sitting in the hallway in the courthouse, and I get a call. And they say, "Oh, you remember your client so-and-so? Well, they found 3 bodies in the basement in East Baltimore. And he's implicated in the murders." So, right back to square one with this guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So we go out. I go to the jail with my law clerk to see the guy. And we're talking. We're at the table. And my law clerk is an attractive young woman. And she's got on a short skirt. And I'm talking to him, and he's looking at her legs the whole time like this. I'm like, "Sir, what are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing?"
Right.
He's just looking at her legs like, "Oh my God, this guy's crazy, man." But I represented the worst of the worst, if some people would call it. I even represented a white nationalist guy
Really?
who was charged with, he was making his own ammunition in his home.
Nothing wrong with that.
It's not, legally.
Right. There's nothing wrong with that.
But they claim it was a fire hazard and a threat, and they raided his house, and they charged him with all this stuff. He wound up getting private counsel eventually, but the point of the matter is that guy, when I would go to see him at the jail, we were like best buddies.
Really?
He loved me, and I could never understand why, because I was black. I said, he said, "No, man, I know you're black, but you're a good man. You're helping me. You never questioned me about my political beliefs. You just said, 'Hey, I'm your lawyer. I'm your man. I'm here to do the best for you. I don't care what your race is or what your political, that's what I'm for. That's what I do.'" So one day I was at my mom's house, and my mom says, everybody's mom says this when they do criminal work, "How can you represent him?
Exactly. Yeah.
He's like a Klansman or something, isn't he?" I said, yeah, Mom, but everybody has the right, constitutional right to effective assistance of counsel. Even people who are morally reprehensible have constitutional rights. So you can't look at it that way. My mom was like, well, I don't see how you do that.
A lot of people don't, man.
I know.
It's, yeah.
But you have to be, I honestly look at it as being like a calling, like a priest. You know, you got to keep all these secrets, right?
Right.
You got to maintain attorney-client privilege at all times. You have to understand that in spite of what your personal opinion might be of that person as an individual, that you have the responsibility to do the very best you can for that person. And it doesn't matter what color they are, what race they are, what religion they are, what their political affiliations are, you know.
Yeah. So white nationalist that's making his own ammunition.
Yeah.
You got a serial killer, homeless guy.
Yes.
What case, I guess, and you said, I'm sorry, 23 years with the OPD?
Yeah.
All right. And then after that, sorry, you did private practice?
I started private practice again. It was my second stint. My second stint started in 2013 is what, I'm doing now. Right.
And that's primarily criminal defense as well?
Primarily, and I do landlord tenant too.
Okay. So, is there like a case that stands out to you? Like one case that I mean, all right, let me just put it this way. Criminal is way more dramatic and high stakes than civil, than the stuff that, right, I deal with. But is there something that really stands out to you?
There was a case in 2000 no, it wasn't even 2000s. It was 98 or 99 or something. So my client's a 14-year-old, 16 years old, and the co-defendant's 14 years old, and they're charged with murdering the grocery store owner in Southwest Baltimore. So we go, cases all over the newspaper, and just a bad, because back in those days, it was like robbing Korean grocers was like the thing back in those days. So it was in the newspaper, it was reporters and all that stuff. So we try the case. Veteran prosecutor, she's deceased now. She's a really good lawyer, and so we try the case, and the two witnesses are two little girls. And after we finished cross-examining them, they didn't know their ass from a hole in the ground. They were just confused, and believe me, I didn't take any pleasure in that. But that's what I had to do. Mm-hmm. So jury came back not guilty for both on everything. So the reporter was there from the Sun paper. So she goes over, and the complaint, the decedent's family, they're crying, everything. She's comforting them and all that. Meanwhile, our client's families are sitting on the opposite side. So she sticks the microphone in my face and says something about what happened, how did you win and all that. I said, why are you only talking to the complainant's family? My client has a family.
Right.
My client's family loves him as much as they loved. So she cut me completely out of the article.
Oh, really?
She cut me out of the article.
That happened to me. But, yeah.
So one day I was walking down the street about 2011, 12, right before I left the PD's office. And I see the kid. He's got a construction helmet and his boots on one shoulder, his helmet and his lunch pail. Mm-hmm. And he says, Mr. Rogers. And I go, say what his name is because I don't want to sacrifice anybody's anonymity. I say, how you doing, man? He says, I'm doing great, man. You know, I haven't been in trouble since that thing happened. I got a job. I got 2 kids. I got a home. I got a car. I'm living great, man. My life's great. You know? I went home happy that night because I know that I did good for somebody.
Yeah.
I helped one person in my career become a better person by helping them get out of trouble.
Those are some serious charges too.
Oh, yeah. Felony murder.
Yeah.
Robbery, deadly weapon.
They would have been in there for
They'd
forever.
still be in there now.
Yeah.
We're dead.
Yeah.
So that case really stands out a lot.
I bet. Yeah.
Really a lot. I've had other ones. You know, sometimes I get people see me and they go, I know you. Oh, shit. Oh, my God. He said, man, you represented me in 1990 something. Man, you said blah, 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 this to the judge, and next thing you know, I would go home. I said, well, man, I'm glad.
That must be an amazing feeling, though.
It's a great feeling. It's a great feeling.
I mean, in my case, in my cases, right, like if I win, it's great, and you know, you get paid, and I guess that's a sense of justice, right? You get some, but I mean, keeping somebody out of jail that's accused of murder, you know, I can't imagine.
There's no feeling like it.
Yeah.
When the jury says not guilty.
Yeah.
It's like.
When did Maryland get rid of the death penalty?
Well, it's been a while.
Was it there when you were working?
At first.
Okay.
At first. I've never done a death penalty case. I refused.
Okay.
I was never that guy who could be a construction worker or manual labor. First of all, I can't even bang a nail in correctly, right? So my deal was I always had to do something with this, you know, as opposed to working in construction or doing anything that required any manual dexterity. Which is funny because I used to play sports. I was pretty good at it.
Right.
But I could never bang a nail. I'd try to screw something and then strip the threads on the screw. And I mean, just like...
Right, yeah. I hear you.
Right, you know, so I'm doing what I wanted. I never wanted to be a doctor because the sight of my own blood made me sick. So that was out. I probably would have been a teacher if it paid more money.
Right.
Because I'd much rather be a school teacher than a lawyer. But how would I raise 3 sons?
You said you had a lot of clerks, right? You were helping out with. I mean, you had a kind of a teaching position, right?
Yeah, at I can't remember the years. The years is blurry now, but I was a supervisor in the felony unit at OPD, and part of what I did was I hired and supervised and took care of all the law clerks and interns.
Mm-hmm.
And one time I had 8 law clerks that I supervised, all graduated the same year from UB.
Okay.
So I went, they invited me to the graduation, so I was there. So I see a judge that I regularly practiced before, and he said, he's retired now. He says, his son was graduating. So he says, Larry, what are you doing here? You've been out of school a long time ago. I said, yes, sir, I have been. He says, I say, I'm here. You see those 8 standing right there waiting to talk to me? I was their supervisor at OPD, and they're my children. And he goes, what? They're my kids. Mm-hmm. I raised them. Now they're graduating and about to take the bar.
Right.
And I feel like none of them failed the bar.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like a proud papa that day because I literally helped them make it, you know.
Yeah.
But I always tell new lawyers, young lawyers, they should always have somebody that they can talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Seek out a mentor. It's invaluable when you're a young lawyer to have somebody that you can call on the phone to ask them questions, somebody that can just make you feel comfortable, you know, like, look, man, everything you're going through now, I already went through.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that you're worried about, I've already worried about it. So this is how you get past it.
Right. Right.
You know, there's no shortcuts to it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have these experiences. You're gonna do. One time when I was in juvenile, I had the stolen car case, and we're trying the case, and they caught the kids in the car. I mean, it was a drop dead loser for the defense. What did I do? I forgot to ask the police officer if the license tag of the number of the car that was reported stolen was the license tag number of the car that they recovered and pulled them fools out of. Not guilty. But at the time, it never occurred to me that that was a question that I needed to ask.
Right. Yeah.
I never made that mistake again. Another thing that happened to me, I benefited from a lot of good mentorship. When I became a state's attorney that first month, there used to be this attorney in the PD's office, and he was an older guy. He was in his 50s, and he had been a cop in his first career, a motorcycle cop. And so he decided that he was going to toughen this kid up. And he would find out which cases were my cases, and he would take them. And every day, he kicked my ass. But not only did he kick my ass, but he would take me aside afterwards and say, look, son, this is what you did wrong. Don't do that. Don't do this. Make sure that you got your elements down and all that kind of stuff. And we tried cases for like 2 weeks straight. And then we go to the bar and drink afterwards.
Right.
He'd clown me, right? But it did something for me.
Mm-hmm.
It made me a lawyer. People think what makes you a lawyer is that you took this test. That's really not. That's really not the deal, man. Mm-hmm. Really, the deal is the experience, going through the process of getting the experience and looking up to people who have more experience than you do. Because you can always be humble and learn from somebody who's been there before you.
Right.
And I always just was that guy who always hung around with the older lawyers. I would go out to drink with them, play softball with them, but I was always listening to what they were talking about. Mm-hmm. You know, just learning, man. You know, and that you can't overestimate that. Yeah.
Well, you grew up in Baltimore, right?
I grew up in Baltimore. The first 5 or 6 years of my life, we lived in Cherry Hill. I was born at University Hospital. I was a preemie, by the way. I was in the hospital. I'm not sure exactly how long it was before my mother was able to take me home. So, like I said, we lived in Cherry Hill in the projects at first, and then we moved to Northwest Baltimore, 1966. And right at that time, it was right at the time when the neighborhood was starting to integrate.
Okay.
Because it was like,
1966, you said.
1966.
Okay.
It was December of 1966, and it was mostly Jewish
Okay.
at the time. And then, you know, as the black folks moved in, the Jewish people moved further up Park Heights and Reisterstown Road, and that's sort of how it went.
Okay.
And so, funny about how things have changed. When I was a little kid, growing up Park Heights, everybody on our block was a homeowner. Working class people, like my father was a steel worker, my mother worked at Social Security, right? You know, both parents in the house. All of my friends was that way. Everybody cared about taking care of their house and sweeping up in front, and just it just was a really good place to grow up. It was relatively safe. You didn't hear about murders and people carrying guns, and it just wasn't that way. I mean, you had heroin addicts on the corner.
Right.
You had winos on the corner.
So, sorry, real quick. This was 66 in, did you say the projects?
No, in the first 6 years of my life,
First.
we lived in Cherry Hill in the projects.
Okay.
And then my father, who had been in the Army, got a VA mortgage because he was a veteran.
Right.
And got a house. We moved, and wow, we had a basement. And, you know, that was great. We could go down in the basement and play play with our toys and not get in the parents' way and stuff. And it was just in those days. It was a good life.
Okay.
It wasn't idyllic, but it was a good life. I didn't miss any meals. I didn't. There was nothing about it as a young kid that I could look back and say that I wasn't happy. Because I was very happy. I had an older brother and a younger sister. And but the one thing about me was that I was always different than the rest of the other kids. Like, I always went to the library because I always wanted to know about what was going on in the world outside of my neighborhood. And the only way, back those days, you didn't have internet, you had books. So I would go to the library every Saturday and get books. And people would see me, they would talk about me, and it just was something that I didn't pay any mind because I knew this was my path, you know, to becoming what I want to become. And as I got older,
I'm sorry, real quick. Did you know from then that you wanted to get into?
not until I was about 17 or 18 did I know. Because I had a relative who was an attorney who later became a judge.
Okay.
And he literally came on my block one day while I was fighting someone and picked me up and threw me in his car, and I never went back home. I lived with him. So that's how I learned how to be a gentleman, how to wear nice dress clothes, how to use a fork and knife at dinner, how to mix drinks, you know, all those things, you know, like he taught me, for example, he said, look, Larry, you should always wear clothes with natural fibers. I didn't care when I was a kid. I didn't care about that. But what he was saying is, when you start working every day and you have to wear dress clothes, you're gonna love wearing cotton shirts as opposed to polyester shirts. Because polyester makes you sweat. Plus, it just looks sleazy. Okay. But anyway, I learned from him, and just to tell you a story about the neighborhood and how it changed. About 7 or 8 years ago, one of my homeboys I grew up with, real tight, he had become a heroin addict and had been shot, and he just was a mess. But I would always ride by to see my boy, because he was always going to be my boy. We would sit on the porch, whatever, right? And just talk. Man, I'm so proud of you, man. Look at you. I say, man, look, I ain't doing nothing that you couldn't have done if you just decided that that's what you wanted to do. And he died. I was very sad about that. And so the funeral was on Park Heights at the funeral home on like 4 or 5 blocks from my house where I grew up. So his mother is very elderly and she couldn't get out to go to the funeral. So I walked around the corner to go to her house. Mm-hmm. And I'm walking. It looks like Berlin after World War II. Mm. And I'm remembering, this is the same neighborhood when I was a teenager I used to hang out. It was a vibrant, wonderful, kids playing in the street and, you know.
Yeah, this is Cherry Hill?
No, this is Park Heights.
Park Heights.
So I'm walking and it's like rows and rows of vacant houses. Mm-hmm. And I walk down the street and they go to my buddy's mom's house. And everybody's like, man, you must not be from around here. You're so well dressed and so well mannered. And so I said, I grew up around the corner right there. Mm-hmm. Right there. And I'm going to my buddy's house to see his mother because he just died. So I decided, I said, look, I'm just going to take off my jacket and roll up my sleeves and just walk the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And I'm walking the neighborhood and I'm looking, I'm like, walk past my house where I grew up. It's in shambles. Mm-hmm. Shambles. All my friends I used to spend the night at their house and stuff. It's just like, I can't describe the feeling that I had, like what happened to my neighborhood. It was such a great place to be at one time, you know, and now it just seems like it's just not what it used to be. And I'm sure there are lots of reasons that people say, okay, some people try to blame it on the fact that it's the people who did this. But I believe socioeconomic circumstances beyond people in the neighborhood's control caused the current condition of that neighborhood. And drugs. Drugs are the worst thing that happened to, and it's not just my neighborhood where I grew up. It's all over the city. Drugs have it has caused family relationships to break down. It's caused people to do things. I remember when I first, in the 90s, the drug situation was so bad in Baltimore, they had a special felony drug court where all they did was felony drug cases. I'm talking about, I'd have 15 people on that docket for arraignment. This is like every day. Mm-hmm. And it was like an epidemic, man. People were selling their kids for crack. People were, women that you knew were respectable people, got one touch of that, man.
When you say selling your kids, what are you talking about?
I mean, here, give me an ounce.
Okay.
You know?
What is, so like when you saw, what's the time frame between when you saw your, I guess that neighborhood kind of?
It's been about 7 or 8 years since that happened when my friend died and I walked around the neighborhood.
Okay.
7 or 8 years.
from then, but I guess from the time that you grew up and maybe left the neighborhood, right?
It would have been,
To the time your friend died and you came back and looked around.
it would be 82, 83 to,
8 years ago, which is 2014.
yeah, something like that, yeah.
Okay.
Dates are approximate, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So about 20, 30 years. All right. So when you're seeing homes completely dilapidated and stuff, I mean, do you know what the cause is? Do you know what?
I think that what I'm seeing are vestiges of slavery.
Okay.
It is economic disparity in incomes between blacks and whites. It is redlining, not allowing people to buy in certain neighborhoods. Mortgage companies charging twice the interest rate on black people, and see these fools again.
Larry, I know you just got a phone call. You got to go. That's fine. We'll be back for part 2.